She had lost her sight, her job, her hope. But her dog? He refused to let her lose everything. Maria sits at the wobbly kitchen table, her fingers resting on the keyboard of an outdated laptop. The glow of the screen washes over her tired face, hollowing out her already sharp cheekbones. She isn't typing. She just stares. A job application is open. Blank fields waiting to be filled. But she's been here before. Dozens of times. And every time it ends the same way. A quiet sigh escapes her lips. She shifts in her chair, feeling the stiffness in her shoulders. She can hear the stack of unpaid bills beside her, the rustling paper shifting slightly when she moves. She doesn't need to see them. Their presence is suffocating enough. Her cane leans against the wall. The eviction notice sits beside it. Deadline, 2 weeks. She swallows hard, pushing the thought away. But then, a sound. A soft shuffle of paws across the floor. Shadow. Maria hears him stir near the couch. The slight huff of his breath. The way his nails click against the hardwood as he stands. She smiles faintly, reaching down to where she knows he'll be. Her fingers find his thick fur, warm and reassuring beneath her touch. "You're always here, huh?" she murmurs. Shadow exhales, pressing his weight into her palm. He's always done this. Always seemed to know when the silence got too heavy. She scratches behind his ears. His fur is thick, slightly coarse, but comforting. Solid. A presence she can trust. She lets her hand linger there for a moment, grounding herself in his warmth. Then, reluctantly, she straightens. "I should try again," she mutters, her voice barely above a whisper. She places her fingers on the keyboard. Begins typing. Name. Address. Disability status. Her stomach tightens. She's been turned away before. Employers who don't want the hassle. The ones who say, "We'll be in touch," but never call. She presses her lips together, determined to finish this time. But then, Shadow's body stiffens. She feels it before she hears it. His muscles tighten under her hand. His ears perk. His breathing changes, shallow, alert. Then comes the first low growl. A deep, rumbling warning. Maria pauses. Her fingers hover over the keyboard. Her heart picks up speed. "What is it?" she asks softly. Shadow doesn't move. Then, his nails scrape the floor. A restless shuffle. His body shifts away from her, toward the door. Maria listens, straining to hear something beyond the quiet hum of the apartment. Nothing. But Shadow's stance is rigid now. Focused. A heartbeat later, he moves, his paws padding toward the front door. Then, a sharp scratch. Maria flinches. Shadow's nails rake against the doorframe, deliberate and insistent. Scratch. Scratch. A low whimper follows. Not out of fear. Out of urgency. Maria's pulse quickens. She grips the edge of the table, listening intently. The apartment is still. The world outside is silent. No footsteps in the hallway. No knock at the door. Nothing. But Shadow. Shadow knows something. Shadow, what is it? Scratch. Scratch. Whine. A tangle of unease knots in Maria's stomach. He's never done this before. Never clawed at the door like this. She pushes back from the table, feeling her way toward him. Her hand finds his body. He's trembling, just slightly. Her breath catches. Shadow is a guide dog. He's trained. Controlled. He doesn't panic. But right now? He's desperate. Her grip tightens on his fur. "What's going on, boy?" Another scratch. Another whimper. Maria swallows. Her mind races through possibilities. Is someone out there? Is there a fire? A gas leak? Did she forget something? She forces herself to breathe. The room suddenly feels smaller. Shadow whines again, his body pressing toward the door. Not pushing her away. Guiding. Urging. Maria's fingers tighten into his fur. She doesn't understand. She can't see what he sees. But something about his urgency, his sheer insistence, makes her pulse hammer against her ribs. Maybe she's imagining it. Maybe it's nothing. But deep down, a whisper of a thought creeps in. What if it's not? Shadow lets out one final, pleading whine, low and urgent, like a desperate plea. Maria exhales sharply. She doesn't know why. She doesn't know how. But she knows one thing with absolute certainty. She needs to open that door. But the moment her fingers graze the lock, doubt slams into her. What if she's wrong? What if she's about to open the door to nothing? The weight of uncertainty presses against her ribs, but then, Shadow moves. A sharp inhale, a shift of muscle, a quiet but urgent whimper. His breath is warm against her wrist, his body pressed against her leg. She shifts on the couch, half asleep, barely registering it. Then, scratch. A sharp, deliberate drag of nails against the front door. Maria's eyes snap open. Shadow never does that. Her pulse kicks up, but she tells herself it's nothing. Just the wind outside. Just her exhausted mind playing tricks. But then, another scratch. Harder. Maria sits up, her ears tuning in. Shadow's pacing. Back and forth. His nails click against the hardwood, sharp and restless. His breathing is off, short, fast exhales, like he's holding something in. Maria frowns. Shadow? Whine. Then, it happens. A sharp tug at her sleeve. Not playful. Not gentle. Desperate. Maria stiffens. Shadow's never done this before. She reaches for him, fingers brushing through his fur, thick, warm, slightly damp from the cold air slipping under the door. His body is rigid beneath her touch. Not shaking. Not afraid. Determined. Maria swallows hard. Her fingers press against his chest, feeling the steady thump, thump, thump of his heartbeat. It's fast. Too fast. Shadow lets out a quiet, short bark. Not loud. Not frantic. Calculated. A warning. Maria sits there, heart hammering, trying to ignore the sharp pull of unease in her stomach. There's nothing out there, she whispers. But the words feel wrong the second they leave her lips. Her apartment is too quiet. The entire building is too quiet. No footsteps in the hall. No creak of distant doors opening or closing. Just the wind pressing against the old window panes. And Shadow won't stop. Another tug. More forceful this time. Maria's breath catches. Her mind races. What is he seeing? Or worse, what is he sensing? Her fingers tighten in his fur. Every instinct screams to stay put. She's blind. She can't just run into the unknown. But Shadow, he's begging her to move. For the first time in a long time, Maria feels small. She grips the fabric of her sweater, knuckles white. A war rages inside her. What if she's overreacting? What if she's not? The silence in the room is crushing now. It presses against her skin, seeps into her bones. Then, Shadow barks. Loud. Sharp. Urgent. Maria flinches. This isn't normal. Her body feels cold, a creeping chill curling around her spine. All right, she breathes. Her voice barely works. All right. She fumbles for her coat, her fingers brushing against the cool fabric before slipping her arms into it. Shadow doesn't move. He's planted at the door, ears pinned back, body taut. Waiting. Maria's shaking now, just slightly. She reaches for her cane, gripping the handle like it's the only solid thing in her world. Shadow is pressed against the door. His breath is steady but deep. His muscles coil like a spring. Maria swallows. Her gut twists with something primal. A feeling she can't name. She doesn't know if it's the cold air seeping in from under the door. Or something else. Something waiting. Something she can't see. Maria exhales sharply. Shadow lets out one final, pleading whine. Her fingers tremble as they reach for the lock. She hesitates. One last second of doubt. Then, she turns the knob. The door creaks open. A gust of cold air rushes in, biting at Maria's skin. The hallway beyond is eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes everything feel heavier. Shadow moves first. His paws tap against the floor, steady but urgent. His leash tugs gently in Maria's hand, guiding her forward. She hesitates. The night feels different. Colder. She grips her cane tighter, feeling the worn grooves beneath her fingers. Shadow, where are we going? No response, just another firm pull. Maria swallows, stepping forward. The floorboards creak beneath her weight. The scent of dust and stale air lingers in the narrow hall. Every step echoes, stretching into the emptiness. She exhales sharply as they step outside. The city is muted at this hour. A distant hum of traffic. The occasional rustle of wind sweeping through empty streets. No voices. No footsteps. Just her and Shadow. She tightens her coat around her shoulders. All right, boy, lead the way. Shadow doesn't hesitate. His movements are precise, intentional. Not like a simple walk, this is different. He knows exactly where he's going. Maria doesn't. She just follows. Shadow picks up the pace. Maria can feel it. The urgency in his steps. Not panic. Purpose. She frowns, gripping the leash tighter. Shadow, slow down. Where are we? Then, a sound. Faint. Almost lost in the night air. Maria stops. Shadow does, too. The hairs on the back of her neck rise. It wasn't just a noise. It was a voice. Maria tilts her head, listening. Footsteps. A chair scraping against pavement. Then, oh, are you here for the contest submissions? Maria's breath catches. The voice is warm, kind, tinged with surprise. A woman. Maria grips her cane, suddenly feeling exposed. I don't. A pause. Then, a soft chuckle. You must have had a long walk. Come in. You made it just in time. Maria's pulse pounds. Her fingers tighten around the leash. Contest? What contest? Shadow shifts beside her, his body pressed close. A silent reassurance. She exhales shakily. I think there's a mistake. The woman hesitates. You're not here for the inspirational radio contest? Maria shakes her head, then stops. A chill prickles her skin. The contest. The one she had read about online. The one offering a life-changing opportunity. The one she had dismissed immediately, because how could she get there? How could she compete? How could she even try when the world kept telling her she wasn't enough? A lump rises in her throat. She never told anyone about the contest. She never searched for the address. Never wrote it down. She had no way of finding it. But Shadow did. A slow, creeping realization unfurls in her chest. He had led her straight here. Straight to the one place that could change everything. She tightens her grip on his fur, emotion swelling in her chest. She doesn't know how. She doesn't know why. But one thing is clear. This wasn't an accident. Shadow had brought her exactly where she needed to be. Inside the small radio station. Warm light hums overhead, casting a soft glow. The air smells of old books, coffee, and faint static from the broadcasting equipment. Maria's hands tremble as she runs her fingers along the edge of the clipboard. The paper beneath her fingertips is crisp, untouched. The form, the one the receptionist had handed her, feels heavier than it should. Her breath is shallow. Her heart pounds. Shadow sits beside her, his presence grounding, steady. But even he seems to sense the weight of the moment. His ears flick forward, his body pressed close. Maria swallows hard. She shouldn't be here. She never planned for this. And yet, here she is. Her fingers tighten around the pen. The tip hovers over the paper, but she doesn't write. A woman's voice cuts through the quiet. Gentle. Encouraging. Take your time. But something tells me you have a story worth telling. Maria exhales. A story worth telling. Her lips part, but no words come. How could she explain? How could she make people understand? She had spent so long being invisible. So long trying and failing to prove she was capable. So many doors closed in her face. So many whispers of doubt, of pity. And yet, Shadow had seen something in her. Something she had stopped believing in. A flicker of determination ignites in her chest. Maria grips the pen tighter and, slowly, carefully, begins to write. The radio host sits across from her, nodding reassuringly. Whenever you're ready. Maria inhales shakily. Her fingers curl into her lap. The mic feels too close. The room too small. The silence stretches, waiting, expectant. She can't see their faces. Can't read their reactions. She only has her voice. Maria licks her lips. Then, softly, almost hesitantly, she begins. At first, her words are careful. Measured. A quiet retelling of struggle, of loss, of nights spent wondering if things would ever get better. But then she talks about Shadow. Her voice wavers, thick with emotion, but she doesn't stop. She tells them how he refused to give up. How he had led her here, to this exact moment, when she had already given up on herself. The radio host leans forward, eyes shining. The air in the room changes. Maria can't see it, but she can feel it. People are listening. And for the first time in a long time, she feels heard. Days later. Maria's apartment. The room is dimly lit. A phone sits on the table, silent, waiting. Maria paces. Shadow watches her from the couch, head tilted. She chews her lip. Her fingers twitch. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she had gotten her hopes up for no reason. Maybe. Ring. Maria freezes. The sound slices through the quiet, sharp and unexpected. Her breath catches. Shadow's ears perk. Maria's hands fumble as she grabs the phone, pressing it to her ear. Her voice is barely a whisper. Hello. A pause. Then, Maria? Congratulations, you won. Her knees nearly buckle. She grips the edge of the table. Her lungs forget how to breathe. The words repeat in her head, but they don't feel real. She won. A laugh, small, disbelieving, escapes her lips. Tears prick at her eyes. She won. Shadow nudges her leg, tail wagging. She sinks to the floor, wrapping her arms around him, burying her face in his fur. But then, the voice on the phone continues. There's something else. Maria stiffens. A business owner heard your story on air. They were moved by your determination, and they want to offer you a job. The world tilts. She pulls the phone away slightly, as if she needs to process the words. A job. A stable income. A fresh start. Independence. Her throat tightens. She had spent so long knocking on doors, facing rejection after rejection. And now, because of Shadow, because of his unwavering belief in her, a door had finally opened. Maria presses a shaking hand to her mouth. A sob slips through. Shadow licks her cheek, his tail thumping against the floor. She laughs, a sound of pure, unfiltered relief. And for the first time in a long, long time, she lets herself believe that things can change. That she is enough. That she is seen. Maria sits on a wooden bench, her hands resting gently on Shadow's back. His fur is warm beneath her fingertips, steady, familiar. She tilts her face toward the sky, feeling the sun on her skin. She never thought she'd feel this again. Not just the warmth, but the lightness. Shadow nudges her hand, his tail thumping against the bench. She smiles, fingers tracing the shape of his ear. Across the park, Liam plays on the swings. His laughter rings through the air, pure, unguarded. The sound sends a pang through Maria's chest. For so long, she had carried guilt. The fear that she wasn't enough. That Liam deserved more. But today feels different. She listens as his small feet hit the ground, as he races toward them, out of breath, cheeks flushed. "Mom, watch this," he calls, before catching himself. His voice softens. "I mean, just listen, okay?" Maria chuckles. "Okay." She hears him move back, preparing to jump. The soft thud of his sneakers against the earth. The slight pause before the launch. Then, a triumphant whoosh as he flies through the air, landing with a victorious laugh. Maria claps, the pride in her chest swelling. "That was amazing." Liam beams. "I jumped higher than before." Shadow barks in approval, his tail sweeping against Maria's leg. Liam drops onto the bench beside her, still grinning. "You know, Mom, I think Shadow's kinda magic." Maria tilts her head. "Oh yeah." Liam nods, serious now. "He didn't just help you get a job. He made you happy again." The words hit deep. Maria swallows. She turns slightly, pressing a hand to Liam's cheek. His skin is soft, warm from the sun. For the first time in a long, long time, she feels like a mother again. Not just surviving. Not just getting through the day. Present. And she owes it all to the dog at her feet. Shadow shifts, resting his head on Maria's lap. His breath is slow, steady. She runs her fingers through his fur, blinking back tears. "You're right," she whispers. "He is magic." Shadow didn't just guide Maria through streets. He guided her back to hope. And maybe, just maybe, some things in life aren't coincidences. What if the right path isn't always the one we see? What if sometimes it takes a loyal heart to lead us where we're meant to be? Have you ever had an animal change your life in a way you never expected? Tell us in the comments. Because sometimes, the smallest act of love leads us home.